Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair.
Good afternoon, Senate Finance, and to our guests. Today is April 6, 2023. We have two documents in front of us. One is a voting list of some House and Senate bills. The other is a blue list of concurrence bills for concurrence or not. So we're going to start with Patrick. Good afternoon, Patrick.
Good afternoon. So the first bill on the list is Senate Bill 19. This is the bill that requires the Department of Transportation, before announcing or proposing a major service change under certain federal standards, to conduct a transit equity analysis and perform a cost benefit analysis. They all have to do these reports before a reduction or cancellation of a capital expansion project. The House amendments make a correction to a definition in the bill. It includes an additional element for analysis under one of the studies required under the bill that was included in one of the bills when introduced, but I think inadvertently omitted in another. And then it changes the effective date of the bill. So the amendments here to the Senate bill would conform to the amendments that this committee put on the House bill, so they could match.
Okay, so you have in front of you Senate Bill 19, which we passed earlier. And this has amendments that put it in the posture of the House bill we just passed. If that's my
Fight.
I'll entertain a motion.
Move favorable.
Motion and a second for a favorable on Senate Bill 19 as before us. Are there any questions? Seeing none, all those in favor, raise your hand. Okay, those opposed, raise your hand.
We're just voting on whether
Concur.
to make.
Correct.
Oh,
Okay, y'all want me to do that again? All those in favor of concurring on Senate Bill 19 that is in front of us, raise your hand. That's a unanimous concurrence. Next bill.
Thank you.
Senate Bill 90, the Stop the Spam Act. So the House amended the bill. They struck the exemption for non-commercial phone solicitation for the purpose of public opinion research. You may recall this was an amendment that the committee put on the bill, on the Senate bill, and they took it off. And so
Senator Reedy.
I don't actually think, I think that could be a constitutional problem to say you can't do public opinion polling. The way some polling works, the way a lot of polling works now is there's a measure of automated dialing. So I don't think that is I won't say it's unconstitutional because I have no idea but I generally it's accepted that for public opinion surveys, you allow robocalls. So I don't I would say, but it's not my bill, so I defer to the sponsor.
Thank you, Senator Kramer.
So procedurally, here's a question I have. The House bill, which has that language in it, if I recall correctly, because we put it on in the Senate when it came over here to this committee. So I guess at this point, that bill now is back in the possession of the House. And they have stricken the language that we put in, this language that now is also stricken from the Senate version. Has that?
I mean, we haven't, so yes, I think that's what they're going to do. I don't know if they've acted that way, but that would be consistent with what they've done, with amending the Senate bill.
Okay. Then they would strike our language back out over the House if we probably.
So the question is, do you want to hold the Senate position and not recede, right? And then name a conference committee.
So I watched the bill hearing
Mhm.
and I listened to the chair of the committee on that side engage in conversation. It was the committee chair who sponsored the amendment to strip the language. So I am guessing we could go to conference committee, but we're not going to necessarily get any further with it. But let's take a run at it and let's not concur. How's that sound? Unless the committee feels otherwise, I'm
Motion and a second to hold the Senate position. All those in favor, raise your hand. Done. Next bill.
Which committee we fight?
ECM.
That's a good one. Yeah.
Okay. Senate Bill 550. This is the administration a bill that establishes initiatives to expand access to capital for businesses and individuals located in low to moderate income communities. The House amendments are technical and clarifying that align with the amendments that were put onto that the House put into the bill. So these amendments would align the Senate bill with the House bill that the committee has passed out.
Is there a motion?
Move favorable.
Have a motion and a second to concur on these technical amendments. Seeing no questions, all those in favor, raise your hand. And we concur. Thanks. Next bill.
Senate bills, let's see. Okay, Senate Bill 648. Electronic health networks and electronic medical records, nursing homes, release of records. You may recall, this is the bill that authorizes a nursing home that contracts with or uses an electronic health network or electronic medical record venue to direct the vendor to release patient medical records or electronic healthcare transactions to a business associate of the nursing home. And the committee put on some amendments. This committee put on some amendments to the Senate bill that stated that the release of records and transaction is permitted with the consent of the patient or the patient's personal representative. And the amendments also prohibited the charging of a fee to a business associate contracted with CRISP, the state designated health information exchange, unless the fee is approved by that exchange. So what the House, after this committee passed the bill out, the Healthcare Commission submitted a letter where they raised some concerns about the amendments that went on here. So what the House amendments have done is that they've taken off those amendments based on the Healthcare Commission's concerns that were raised. And I can share what the Healthcare Commission's comments were. The first is that they indicated that the consent provision that was put in the bill would impede information exchange between CRISP and an electronic health network for public health reporting and monitoring, and that HIPAA permits these types of disclosures without patient authorization. And then regarding the fee provision, their response in opposition to those amendments, it indicated that this could have unintended consequences and potentially result in a conflict with other provisions in current law. And that vendors may be permitted to assess fees on nursing homes under those amendments. And so based on those comments, the House elected to strip those amendments off. And so that's what the issue is.
Okay, have a
Second.
motion and a second to concur. Any questions? All those in favor, raise your hand. And we unanimously concur. Next bill.
Senate Bill 805 requires health insurance carriers and Medicaid to provide coverage for biomarker testing for the purpose of diagnosis, treatment, appropriate management, ongoing monitoring of a disease or condition supported by medical and scientific evidence. The House amendments just makes a technical correction and makes the bill in the same posture as the House bill, cross-filing.
Have a motion and a second for a favorable to concur on the amendments on Senate Bill 805. Seeing no questions, all those in favor, raise your hand. We unanimously concur. Next bill.
Okay, House Bill 214. This is, so House Bill 214 establishes a commission on public health to make recommendations to approve the delivery of foundational public health services in the state. You'll recall that the Senate amended this House bill to do certain things, including adding members of the General Assembly to the commission, altering the staffing of the commission, and changing the process and criteria for designated co-chairs. The House elected to not concur to these amendments that the Senate put on. So the question is whether to recede or not recede. Go to conference.
Senator Hershey.
Right, so when the House requests that we receded, they've already announced conferees, right? That's how it comes over to us.
Yes, we do have conferees.
Right, so if
Mhm.
we can then either decide that we're okay with their position, or we can say, we'll meet you in conference.
Correct.
Thanks.
Any other? Senator Lamb?
So they're requesting to take those amendments off. Is that what they're,
Mhm.
okay?
They're saying, take the bill away. They want to meet us in conference.
I would suggest going to conference and
Okay, so the motion is to not recede and go to conference. Any questions? All those in favor of that motion, which was seconded by the vice chair, very quietly? She-
Yes.
All those in favor, raise your hand. All right, so we'll name some conferees. I'll work with you on that, Patrick. Okay, we'll move to the next bill.
House Bill 347 establishes requirements and restrictions on pharmacy benefits managers during the pharmacy audit process. You'll recall that the Senate amended that bill to limit the application of the requirements and limitations on audits to PBMs that provide pharmacy benefit management services on behalf of a carrier and not the ERISA plans. So the House didn't like that and decided to not concur to that amendment. So the question is,
So the same options that we had on the previous bill are the options that we have. The House has said they do not accept the Senate posture on this bill. We can either recede and go with their position, or we can not recede and go to conference. Not, okay. Or I have a motion and a second to not recede. Are there any questions? All those in favor, raise your hand. Okay, we will not recede. So. Okay, well, you'll, so noted, please. Tammy, please.
Exactly.
Those opposed, those opposed. Okay, that's one. So that's a 10-1. Yes, sir.
If I could, I got confused about Senate Bill 648, but I can wait till we're done with Patrick's list.
Okay, I think that's the last bill on
That's it.
Patrick's list. So you can go ahead. Mhm.
So we just took the House's amendments.
so they took off our amendments and we decided to recede to concur with that position, to concur with that position.
There was a concern raised to me that this was getting in the middle of a dispute between one vendor and another. So what could you just tell me one more time? I know
Yeah.
somehow I was looking at the wrong thing.
So I mean, the basis, as I understand it, of the decision to take off those amendments that the committee put on was based on the Healthcare Commission's letter of opposition, which I described to you. The issue that you raise about whether this is getting, in between a dispute between two vendors is another question. That wasn't the specific issue that was raised in the Healthcare Commission's letter. So
Are we
right.
Are we conceding the House's point, or are we fighting? Where do we end up?
We
We
concur.
We
concur.
concurred. Yeah, I think there were some safeguard amendments that the people who were talking to me thought were good, but we concurred. So, yeah, okay.
Thank you, Patrick. Nathan?
Up next is Senate Bill 145, which as passed by the Senate would authorize the State Board of Social Work Examiners to issue first a conditional license if an administrative delay prevents or a required examination from being available for at least 15 business days. And also as passed by the Senate, the bill would have further authorized the board to issue a temporary license to an applicant who, except for passing the required examination, has met the appropriate education and experience requirements for the bill. As passed by the Senate, the bill was an emergency measure and subject to sunset July 1 of 2025. The House amendments strike language establishing the temporary license altogether and makes the bill effective October 1, 2023, and strikes the sunset provision.
Okay, so as you all will recall, we had three social work bills that were presented. The first one, Senate Bill 145, dealt with the issue that the test was unavailable a couple of times. And so they wanted to create an opportunity for people to continue to practice short term until the test became available. That was Senate Bill 145 as introduced, only they called what we called a conditional license, a temporary license. Also in that bill, we took an issue that was in Senate Bill 872 that dealt with the issues brought to our attention about challenges with the licensing exam and the disparities related to race in terms of the outcomes on the exam. The House decided not to accept the provisions that we put into Senate Bill 145 to address that issue. They did, and Nathan will describe in a moment, put some additional amendments on Senate Bill 871, which is the second social work bill that we passed. We did not move 872.
Correct.
So basically, we combined three bills into two and tried to take action. The House basically separated the two actions and did not offer a temporary license to deal with the testing challenges at this time. So what's your pleasure? So basically, I don't want to penalize Senate Bill 145, which came in to address that short-term issue of the test being unavailable. So, I mean, we could try to take it to conference, or we can accept this bill and trust that 871 and the work that it's done with the work group that we adopted, and they pretty much accepted most of our recommendations on that one. It's just going to be a slower outcome to address the testing issue, but I mean, you all helped work on the solution that we brought forward, so would love to get your input and learn what your pleasure is. Is there a second? I'll say I have a motion and a second to concur on the House amendments on Senate Bill 145. All those in favor, raise your hand. That is 10. Those opposed? That is 1. Okay, we'll concur.
The next bill is Senate Bill 232, which authorizes a licensed athletic trainer to perform dry needling as a specialized task if the athletic trainer is approved by the Board of Physicians. The House amendments make a technical correction to the definition of dry needling, striking the phrase "a mechanical device" from the definition, aligning the cross-filed bills. So with the amendment that the House made, the bills are identical.
Have a motion and a second from the sponsor and her friend. All those in, I see no opposition. All those in favor, raise your hand. Okay, that's a unanimous concurrence on 232. Next bill.
The next bill is Senate Bill 331. It's an emergency bill that alters the membership of the West North Avenue Development Authority and generally exempts the authority from state procurement law. The authority is still subject to a written policy and procedure requirements for exempt units and the state's MBE program generally. The House amendments add 2 members to the membership of the authority to be appointed by the chair of the authority. Alters from October 1 to December 15, 2023, the date that the authority must submit its comprehensive report. Requires that the report include procurement activities and requires the report to be shared with the House Health and Government Operations Committee. And finally, the House amendments specify that the procurement exemption in the bill terminates September 30th, 2026, regardless of whether the authority generally is extended.
Have a motion from the sponsor to concur. Are there any questions? Seeing none, all those in favor, raise your hand. Okay, that's a unanimous concurrence. Next bill.
Senate Bill 506 authorizes the town of Forest Heights in Prince George's County to undertake urban renewal projects for blight clearance by exercising the power of eminent domain to acquire properties in blighted areas that are zoned for commercial purposes. That's as the Senate passed the bill. The House amendments add areas that are zoned for residential use to the scope of the authority. The Finance Committee struck residential property from the scope of Senate Bill 506, which is the cross-file to this bill, when the committee considered it on Tuesday. So to align the bill with the bill that the committee just passed, the motion would be to not concur.
Not to confirm. Motion not to.
Have a motion and a second not to concur on Senate Bill 506. Are there any questions? Seeing none, all those in favor, raise your hand. That is unanimous. Okay, next bill.
Next bill is 732, Senate Bill 732. It transfers the state coordinator for autism strategy from the Governor's Office of Community Initiatives to the Department of Disabilities, and specifies that the department must provide staff for the advisory stakeholder group on autism-related needs. The bill also expands the membership of the Maryland Commission on Disabilities to include an individual with a traumatic brain injury. The House amendments require that as of the bill's effective date, the governor transfer 2 positions and the associated general funds for the state coordinator for autism strategy from the executive department to the Department of Disabilities. The amendments also advance the bill's effective date from October 1 to July 1 of 2023.
Oh.
Is a departmental.
Say one more time, the House amendments moved up the date, it was gonna be effective October 1.
To July 1.
It's July, and it moves some pins to support.
It requires the movement of the positions and the funding to support the change to the law that the Finance Committee made.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to concur on Senate Bill 732. Seeing no questions, all those in favor, raise your hand. And that's unanimous concurrence.
So
Okay,
my
next bill.
last concurrence is Senate Bill 871, which establishes a work group, as passed by the Senate, establishes a work group to identify alternatives to specified social worker examination requirements and develop recommendations for an assessment method for independent practice. It also extends the sunset of the Board of Social Work Examiners to 2025 and requires that the board notify an applicant whether the application is complete within 10 days of receipt. So the House amendments, which are shown in a reprint that was distributed, makes the bill an emergency measure. It changes the requirement for notice for completion of an application from 10 days to 15 business days. It alters the membership of the work group. It authorizes the work group to establish subgroups or contract with an entity with expertise in analyzing assessment bias. It requires the work group to determine by December of this year whether the state should continue to use the examinations developed by the Association of Social Work Boards, whether the state should issue temporary licenses to applicants who complete all requirements except the examination, and how to provide supervision at no cost to bachelor social worker and master social worker licensees. And then the final category of amendments is adopted by the House, require a preliminary report by September 1 of this year and a final report by December of 2024, and specifies elements that the final report must include.
So just by way of background, follow up to the conversation we just had related to social work, I spoke with the sponsor of the bill. First of all, she thanked the committee for the work sessions, coming up with what we believed was a good short-term solution and a path towards a long-term solution in this area. She did ask that we proceed with the bill as it came over from the House so that we don't jeopardize losing this whole interim in terms of making progress in this area, with a recognition that we'll all be back in January, barring any unforeseen circumstances. So with that, I'd entertain a motion.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to concur with the House position on Senate Bill 871. Seeing no questions, all those in favor, raise your hand. And that's unanimous. Okay, thank you, Nathan.
Which
We're
to
going
Dave.
to David.
Was Senator?
The first bill, well, not the first bill actually on the concurrence list is Senate Bill 2. This is the cross file to House Bill 502, which you the other day just voted on with a technical amendment. This is the one that deals with reimbursing folks who had their electronic benefits or their benefits stolen through electronic benefit cards. The House amended the bill to be identical to the Senate bill, to the House bill. The House amended the Senate bill to be identical to the House bill, which you just passed with some technical amendments. So that would be the amendments in front of you. So to be consistent, you would want to concur with these to have identical bills.
Have a motion and a second to concur on Senate Bill 2. Seeing no questions, all those in favor, raise your hand. That's unanimous concurrence. Next bill.
Okay, the next bill is Senate Bill 228. This is the long-term care and dementia care navigation program. The bill that establishes that program. As amended, it is the same to House Bill 614. There were some additional amendments added to clarify the use of these funds by the local areas on aging. And on the floor, the House amended in and chronic disease. So now the bills are identical.
Have a motion and a second to concur on Senate Bill 228. Seeing no questions, all those in favor, raise your hand. That's a unanimous concurrence. Congratulations. Next bill.
Okay, the next bill is House or Senate Bill 431. It's the same as House Bill 565, which you just acted on a couple days ago. It authorizes the holder of a Class 9 limited distillery to apply for and obtain a Class 8 liquor wholesaler's license. The House utilized their expertise in liquor laws and made some changes. Now both bills are in the same posture.
Have a motion and a second to concur on Senate Bill 431. Seeing no questions, all those in favor, raise your hand. Unanimous. Senator Hershey, were you with us? Okay, unanimous concurrence. Next bill.
The next bill is Senate Bill 448. This is the bill, if you recall, that involves the extension of the sunset regarding direct shipments by in-state beer and liquor manufacturers to other to residents in the state who are over 21. You also, when you sent the bill over, provided a limit on how much liquor and beer could be shipped. The House had some changes to the bill, and those are in front of you. And very specifically, what the House did was it basically put this authorization in uncodified language, and they kept the limitation on how much could be shipped over the course of a year, and they sunset it in 1 year. I guess there's also an amendment that didn't get adopted by the House, so I think that the sponsor of the bill has a motion.
Okay, so there's a motion not to concur. Any other questions? All those in favor of that motion, raise your hand. And that's a unanimous, we will not concur.
And you'll need some conferees.
We will find them right
Okay.
after this.
All right. No. Okay, the next bill on the list is House or Senate Bill 560. It's the same as House Bill 626. If you recall, this is the one that requires folks who do research facilities to do animal testing to pay into a fund based on how many animals they test. And then it requires the fund to be used for various purposes to promote non-animal testing on products and in research. There was a technical amendment put on by the House to make the bill identical to the House bill, which passed. So
Have a motion and second to concur on Senate Bill 560. Seeing no questions, all those in favor, raise your hand. That's unanimous concurrence. Next bill.
mhm. The next bill on the list is Senate Bill 644. This, as it crossed over, would have required healthcare facilities to provide information immediately to the local maternal mortality death review board. This bill came out of the Senate with no amendments. However, once it crossed over, people got a little more interested in it. And so the House made some amendments and they simply moved the requirement to another part of the code to more conform with an existing requirement. And they took out the word immediate or promptly. So it's now consistent with existing law if you on another part of the code. And otherwise they still have to provide the information, but they just don't have to do it promptly.
Senator Vital has a question.
I seem to remember from the hearing that that was the problem, is they weren't getting information quickly enough. And so to me, the whole reason for the bill was this immediacy, and we've taken that out, or the House has taken it out.
Can you tell us what's left in the bill? So where I'm trying to pull up the text,
it's
where
this-
they moved the.
They just
word.
moved it to another part of the code that already exists that provides a healthcare provider as defined under Title 19 shall provide to the maternal mortality review program reasonable access to all relevant medical records under review. And then it takes the language that was in the bill originally in another part of the title and moves it up to a healthcare. It's the same language, except it doesn't have the word promptly in there anymore.
So Senator, the way I read this, I just wanted to make sure I was understanding it correctly. It still does allow them to get access to information they weren't previously
It says
getting.
prompt access. So they
Prompt instead of immediate. That's the change. Okay. Any additional questions?
Second.
Have a motion and second to concur on Senate Bill 644. Seeing no additional questions, all those in favor, raise your hand. Promptly. Very good. That's unanimous. Not immediately, but promptly. Okay.
Okay,
right, next bill?
The next bill is Senate Bill 827. This is the bill that would extend the sunset date of the State Commission on Real Estate Appraisers, Appraisal Management Companies, and Home Inspectors until January 1st, 2024. That's not correct. Until 2026, July 1, 2026. It would also require an evaluation to be conducted on appraisal practices. The House amended the bill to be the same as the Senate amended the House bill. So now both bills are identical.
Have a motion and a second to concur on Senate Bill 827. Seeing no questions, all those in favor, raise your hand. And that's a unanimous concurrence. Next bill.
Next bill is another Senator Hayes bill. What? This bill is the bill that made various updates to the Family and Medical Leave Insurance Program. I don't know if you want me to go into detail, but you went through. What they did was apparently in drafting the amendments, I made a mistake and the House corrected that mistake. Yeah, they didn't make any changes, just simply corrected a drafting error.
If we don't concur, your mistake lives forever.
We broke state.
Okay, I have a motion from the sponsor and a second to concur on Senate Bill 828. Seeing no additional questions, all those in favor, raise your hand. It's a unanimous concurrence. Yes.
Before we conclude the consent calendar, because I think that was the last bill.
That's the last bill, yes.
If I may, I received a text from the House cross-file sponsor of the spam bill. And the House sponsor is comfortable with the way the bill was amended in the committee with jurisdiction in the House. As such, could I ask that we reconsider, and I'm going to try to get this right, reconsider the vote? Yes, ma'am. Senate Bill 90. At first page, third bill down. If we could reconsider the vote by which I'm going to say the motion passed, if I got that right, and agree to consent. To concur, thank you.
So the motion would be to reconsider that motion. It is a motion to not. Second.
Yes, you can, Senator.
Maybe I didn't understand the amendment. I'm just trying to be sure. It seemed like the main difference was that they added in polling and opinion research as things that could be cited for doing this kind of spam calling. Is that correct? Or did I misunderstand?
I think that's essentially right. I mean, what this committee did was it exempted that type of polling spam from the limitations of the bill, and the House Economic Matters Committee didn't think that they should be exempted. So they stripped that amendment that this committee put on.
I just think it's important. I'm not gonna, it's just, I would say it's the sponsors, but I just think, and I have no conflict here, by the way, just what I know about not just campaigns and elections, but also issue research is there's polling agencies that will call people who are registered voters. Because this is landlines. This is not just cell phones. You're not allowed to call cell phones. You can't call cell phones. So it's only landlines. I mean, there's a way you can call cell phones, but you have to obtain the list legally, all that kind of stuff. This is trying to get at spam. So I'm just warning that you may be saying they can't. I'm just warning. I don't necessarily have a dog in the fight, but.
So I will share that we're not sure. Here's why we added the amendment here in committee it was more clarifying. The bill exempts nonprofits already. This clarifying amendment was for nonprofit, and if you've got the language there, Patrick, nonprofit polling. And so there was a question brought to my attention by a nonprofit polling entity that said, well, we're not sure whether we're in or out, you're exempting nonprofits. So to clarify that, we had this amendment language, and Patrick, it does specify, correct?
What it exempts is non-commercial telephone solicitation for the.
Oh, it
purpose
wasn't
It's
nonprofit.
non-commercial telephone solicitation for the purpose of public opinion research. Mhm.
Or issues, not just campaigns, but issues or.
What matters most to you?
So what?
Senator Hayes. Engrossed in my own thoughts.
No, I'm trying to figure it out myself, Madam Chair. But when we say non-commercial, is there examples of that? Like, say, one of our local publications, like the Baltimore Banner or the Baltimore Sun or something, are they considered commercial or non-commercial? Because I know oftentimes they will do issue polls to try to figure out what people are thinking or whatever. Do we have examples of what non-commercial are?
I don't know if we do have examples of what non-commercial would include. Just to fill this out a little bit, what the bill also has as an exemption is so what's exempted is a non-commercial telephone solicitation for religious, charitable, political, or educational purposes when that's a nonprofit that's doing that. So that's a separate exemption.
That's where I think there was then seeking to get the clarification and maybe, but they're exempted now,
Yes,
even without this amendment.
correct.
Okay.
But only if they're a nonprofit. So like, is Gallup a nonprofit? I don't know. I'm just a hypothetical example. Is Gallup a nonprofit? Is like, one of the more famous polls we have in Maryland is the folks like Miley Cromer and that group. That's obviously from a university, so they'd be fine. But they don't use they probably don't use automated dialing anyway. The reason I'm bringing this up, it's not to mess with the bill. We can move forward if we want to. We passed several years ago. We had a bill to try to crack down on the Russians and internet advertising. It seemed like that was the goal of it. And we passed a bill in Maryland. So Maryland is now one of only 2 states in the country where you cannot use Google advertising in state or local political campaigns. Federal still can. You cannot run Google ads or YouTube ads for state and local candidates. Because we passed this bill that put this unique restriction on what Google would have to do. So us and the other state, I think it's Washington State, Google's like, fine, we're just not going to do ads here. which is their choice. And I'm not trying to re-adjudicate that. I'm just saying I was keeping an eye. I don't know that you want to, that language, non-commercial use is great. Cause yeah, we don't want people using it for commercial. I kind of liked the language the way it was. But I know time is short. I do think you ought to think about it.
Received the text from the House sponsor, so I was willing to concede the issue to the House sponsor and, you know,
Could we hold it?
be
for, like,
done.
could we hold the concurrence like for one more voting session?
You know what the schedule is.
We'll likely be back tomorrow morning, the little bill that you guys are working on this session.
Okay, then that's, I don't have a problem with that, Madam Chair.
The kind of the motion to reconsider, we'll just take that bill off the calendar of actions for today so that we can take that one up again tomorrow morning. Okay, Senator Bidle?
I don't know if we can clarify with maybe the other committee to put this on, but the way I read this, a non-commercial, which I think is a political campaign, telephone solicitation for the purpose of public opinion research, including polling on behalf of a political campaign. It really concerns me if that can't be done, because we've all participated in those polls where they call and they say, what's most important to you? You know, push 1 for this and 2 for that. It can be robo. So I just, since this is your bill, Senator, if you could maybe get a little more information, I'd appreciate it.
Okay, so any other questions about our actions on the blue document? We'll now turn to the yellow voting list that we have in front of us. Patrick?
Yeah.
Welcome back.
Thank you. So just in an oversight on my part, there is a Senate cross-file to House Bill 128, which the committee passed out yesterday. So Senate Bill 171 is the bill that requires a person who obtains a private passenger motor vehicle insurance policy at the time the policy is purchased to opt out of obtaining
So
EU.
you have before us the EUIM bill, just the Senate version of the bill. So we accidentally moved the House version without having the companion Senate bill with it.
So the amendments would be to conform to this House bill.
And we would have to conform this bill to the House bill as we adopted it on yesterday. Have a motion and a second. Hey, folks, okay, we have a motion and a second to conform Senate Bill 171 to the same posture that we passed House Bill 128 on yesterday, and that was on the Senate floor today. Are there any questions? Oh. It's sitting here. That's the issue. We didn't move it. Yes, we've got to take it through the Senate. Yep, it's got to go through second reader, third reader. Yeah. Okay, any additional questions? Madam Floor Leader. Okay, all those in favor, raise your hand. That is 10. Those opposed for consistency. Very good. Raise your hand. So that's a 10-1 favorable on Senate Bills 171 with the amendments. Next bill.
Next bill is House Bill 808. The Finance Committee is second on this bill and JPR is primary. This is the committee, JPR approved a bill this bill is identical, House Bill 808 to Senate Bill 859, which the Senate passed earlier this session. This is the bill that generally establishes protections for information relating to legally protected healthcare when that information is sought by another state, and prohibits health occupations boards from taking disciplinary actions relating to the provision of legally protected healthcare, and includes other protections.
Have a motion and a second for a favorable on House Bill 808. Seeing no questions, all those in favor, raise your hand. I count 8. Those opposed, raise your hand. That's 3. That bill receives a favorable report with an 8-3 vote. Next bill.
The next bill for your consideration is House Bill 827, which has come out of the Senate Rules Committee. As amended and reflected in the reprint, House Bill 827 is identical to Senate Bill 696, which passed the Senate unanimously earlier this session. The bill establishes the Prince George's County Development Authority Prince George's Gateway Development Authority in Prince George's County to support the development and approval of a comprehensive neighborhood revitalization plan in the target area in the county. The amendment alters the name of the authority, aligning it to the Senate bill.
Thank you. Have a motion and a second for a favorable on House Bill 827. Seeing no questions, all those in favor, raise your hand. That's a unanimous favorable report. Next, oh, thank you, Nathan. You're done. Okay, next bill, and we're back to David. Who's? All right, so guys, we have one more bill that is actually, looks like two more bills on your calendar, but it's actually the same bill twice, correct, David?
Correct, yes.
Okay,
But you'll do the Senate bill first. Very quickly, the bill, there's a lot of pages here, but it's not nearly as complicated as you think because of the number of pages. This is Senate Bill 367. It restructures the state's rules, procedures, processes, rights, and prohibitions regarding collective bargaining by designated public employees in the state. And these designated public employees include state employees under Title III of the State Personnel Pensions Article, community college employees, which got collective bargaining rights a couple years ago, and certificated and non-certificated employees of local boards of education. That would be teachers and all the other folks who are eligible for collective bargaining in the schools. The bill consolidates different collective bargaining laws that apply for different employees in one set of rules and procedures, and it repeals three boards: the State Labor Relations Board, the State Higher Education Labor Relations Board, and the Public School Labor Relations Board, and establishes one board to oversee collective bargaining for all these groups of folks I just mentioned, and that would be the Public Employee Labor Relations Board. So there's three there, and the reprint in front of you, there's several sets of amendments. One set of amendments is from the sponsor of the bill to conform the bill to the House bill as introduced. There were some changes made subsequent to that the folks who wanted the bill, and they made some changes that made it into the House bill, but the Senate bill was already dropped. So the sponsor offered amendments to make those bills the same. Another group of amendments in the bill come from the House, since they passed House Bill House Bill 984. Some of the other amendments in this reprint come from them. And then the chair had discussions with the chair of the Personnel Subcommittee as well as with the governor's office about other amendments in the bill. So quickly, what's combined under this bill again is three boards into one. Most of the newly established board comes from language that relate to the State Labor Relations Board. Every group has different sets of procedures for elections and how you designate an exclusive representative. All of that is also combined in this bill under one set of laws. And quickly to go over some of the amendments. Oh, and there were also in the first part of the bill, pages 3 through 23, this concerns the education article, and various conforming changes are made to the education article in recognition of this one board and one set of laws that pertain to elections and designation of certified exclusive representatives. There was something in this part of the bill that was controversial regarding turning class size and school calendar into permissive categories of negotiations. That's struck from the bill. So the existing prohibition against negotiations on class size and school calendar continue on. And there's no changes in this bill to that. So if you go to page, let's see, if you go to page 24 of the reprint, this starts the consolidation of all the various laws I talked about regarding elections, certification of bargaining reps, as well as establishing the new board to oversee collective bargaining for teachers, folks who aren't teachers in the schools, state employees, and community college employees. So there's a series of definitions established. There was a definition in the bill, and it was amended by the House for confidential employee. The problem with this definition is it created conflicts with other definitions of confidential employee in the law. And also, although the criteria for elections and the roles of the boards to oversee collective bargaining are all consolidated here, each group maintains the part of collective bargaining regarding negotiations. So there's no changes in the current laws regarding how these groups negotiate with management. So, and confidential employee mostly relates to who can and cannot bargain under those processes. So if individual bargaining is left up to the parts of the code that involve is not changed, then there's no reason to have a definition here for confidential employee. There's a if you go to public employee on page 24, you'll see it's just moved to another part. It was improperly it wasn't in alphabetical order, which is my fault because I drafted this bill. I see a pattern here. And then on page 25, there was a definition of strike that was different than the current definition of strike in current law. So the current definition of law defining strike is now restored to this bill. So this would apply to all these parties regarding strikes. If you go to keep going through here, just by way of example, there's various provisions of law regarding employee information and access to employees. All of that is consolidated into one place here, and most of these provisions are about the same. There is an amendment if you go to page 29. It brings back into the law the state's rights regarding management for state employees. So you'll see an amendment on page 29, which brings the existing state management rights into this bill. So they would continue under this bill also. And that takes you to the next unnumbered page. Going further in here, there's a lot of clarifying amendments offered that come along with moving the changes that the House had subsequent to this, and the sponsor is making changes to conform that. And there's unfair labor practices here for management and for exclusive representatives. Those are carried over from existing law. Let's see what. So a lot of this is again found in existing law in certain places for either the community colleges or state employees mostly, and that's all just consolidated under one place here. If you go to page 36, this starts the formation of the new board, 3 boards into one. And by way of background, all 3 boards currently have the same staff. So there's really no changes there. But what's different about bringing in 3 boards into one, because there's 3 certain sections they're going to have to monitor and 3 separate parts of the law. It establishes deputy directors. So there'll be a deputy director on page 39 for the executive branch labor relations. There'll be a deputy director for public school labor relations and a deputy director for higher education labor relations. So instead of having separate boards, you'll just have separate staff who will be responsible for overseeing and dealing with complaints that occurred during collective bargaining between management and exclusive representatives. Let's see, let's go to page 42. There was some of the board's duties are specified here, and most of these duties are carried over from the State Labor Relations Board, actually. So there isn't much difference here between the powers that are granted for the State Labor Relations Board, which oversees collective bargaining for state employees, and this new board. There was additional language here that concerns the role of the deputy directors in looking at the actions that they could get complaints about during collective bargaining. And there's an amendment here to strike prosecute and instead just talk about investigations rather than prosecute. That has different connotations in different parts of the code. There's clarifying language about what this new board will be bound, what guidance they're going to use from the previous boards. That would be on top of page 43. And again, subtitle 4, elections and certifications of exclusive representatives. Most of this, in fact, 95% of this is already an existing law and it's just moved here. Let's go to page 50, where we get out of, okay, then we're in the last part of the new language in the state government article. There was language in the bill as introduced that provided that a collective bargaining agreement would include provision for binding arbitration on matters that come up during the negotiation process or during the implementation of a memorandum of understanding. That was struck. That was also struck by the House. And then there was language on the bottom of the bill to the next page, which is not related at all to what this bill is about regarding establishing a new board and consolidated election procedures. It further modified grievance procedures for state employees only. A couple of years ago, you passed separate legislation that allowed exclusive reps to use the state grievance process for certain matters, particularly relating to MOUs. This takes that a little further, but that has nothing to do with the actual structure, the intent of the bill about going 3 boards into one and having consistent election laws throughout. So those are the amendments in the bill, and that's all I have on this for you now.
Yes, House.
There's some amendments that are in here that aren't in the House. What's not in the House bill is taking out that language regarding grievance procedures for state employees. The House had a different definition of strike. This restores the original definition of strike that applies now for state employees. What else is in there? Oh, they actually changed their definition to supervisory employees, and that's when you start realizing that there's some confusion here because the idea of the bill was originally to have one definition of not supervisory, but confidential employee. But by changing the definition, they created a difference with certificate employees and also with how confidential employees are determined for state employees. That's done by regulation, and there was no direct reference there. And since that has to do with actually the bargaining process for over whatever they bargain for, wages, terms and conditions of employment, it might be simpler just to take that definition out. So those are pretty much the differences between the two. Oh, well, there was one more change, which there's reference in here to the National Labor Relations Board, and it said they shall use them. And that's changed to a may, because that would reflect current practice. They do that now. And so what you're doing is you're just codifying current practice. So those are the 3 changes between the House and this bill and what the House sent over, and the rest are Senator Lamb's amendments to conform it to the House bills introduced.
Senator Kramer.
Yesterday I was Senator Feldman. Now I'm Senator Hershey.
Good point.
Senator Kramer.
So David, could you spend a little bit more time with me? I think it was on page 50 and I was trying to follow where, so binding arbitration was stricken.
Yes.
And then there's this whole section about the grievance procedure. And you said that what we've already got, we've got something established.
Yes, you do.
In law now.
Yes.
This bill does not affect that.
No.
But I'm reading through this now, it appears as though this bill in its original language provided that if the employees if the sections of current law related to grievance were applicable to the appropriate employees, then there was a process in the bill that would be the procedure for a grievance. Is that correct?
No,
Okay.
this is
So-
separate and distinct from anything else in the bill. So the processes established in this bill concern oversight of collective bargaining by the board of elections and any other disputes that arise during collective bargaining. And collective bargaining is more than just, negotiations over wages and conditions in terms of employment. It's also elections, certification of bargaining units, which employees belong in a bargain. All that is consolidated. This part here has to do with another law in state personnel and pensions under the state grievance procedures, and also University of Maryland system, which is related somewhat to the bill you had actually earlier this year, which is separate and distinct from all the other parts of this bill establishing three boards or taking three boards into one.
And I think I'm with you through all of that. I guess and maybe I'm not characterizing it properly. It appears as though from the language in the bill, it says this section applies to employee organizations that represent public employees entitled to use the grievance and appeal procedures that are established, as we just said, currently in statute. And it would have permitted those for that classification of employees, then it appears as though it indicated that if there was a difference of opinion, that those grievance procedures would apply under this new law.
No,
No.
the arbiter on here would have been the Office of Administrative Hearings. If you go to the page 51, on matters relating to grievances, that the exclusive representative could utilize the grievance laws for state employees, MDOT employees, UMS employees. If it gets to a point where they can't agree, then it would be left to the Office of Administrating Hearings to decide, not the State Labor Relations Board.
Can I do this with apologies to the committee? We're going to need to take a very quick break. We have 2 confirmations and executive noms. We have 7 members on this committee that are on executive noms. We've got one of the nominees is from one of our members' districts. So we're going to it's probably going to take 10, 15 minutes at best. So we're going to take a break and come back here in 15 minutes with apologies to our guests and to the members. We'll be right back. And to the staff, 4:15, right back here. We'll continue. We'll pick right back up on Senate Bill 367. Be right back. Sorry. Good afternoon again. All right, it is still Thursday, April 6th. We still have two bills before us, and I didn't catch this earlier. These bills are jointly assigned, so we really, yes, so we're gonna go back to David and Senate Bill 367, pick us up where we left off.
I was answering questions.
Okay. So you have before you Senate Bill 367 with amendments. Are there any additional questions?
Move favorable. Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second for a favorable on Senate Bill 367 with amendments. Seeing no further questions, all those in favor, raise your hand. I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Those opposed, raise your hand. And that's 3. So that bill receives a favorable report on an 8-3 vote. Now we'll take up the House Bill 984.
Which could you could just move to amend to be identical to the Senate bill you just approved.
I have a motion and a second. I have a motion and a second to conform House Bill 984 to the posture that we just passed, Senate Bill 367. Seeing no questions, all those in favor, raise your hand. Wait, we gotta vote 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I was like, wait, no, we got 9. Okay, so House Bill 984 received 8 affirmative votes. Those opposed, raise your hand. That is 3, 1 in motion. Okay, so that's an 8-3 vote. That bill, House Bill 984, is adopted with amendments. That is the last bill on our calendar for the day. For those of you that have not been reached out to, you're done for the day as far as finance is concerned. I think we're gonna need to come back in the morning at 9:30. Okay, you want 10, but we can try 10. I'll see you at 10. Meeting adjourned. I let you negotiate.